Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, comedy on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And last night I felt the spirits of my guest's brother and a lot of my own people looking down in a way that I haven't. I connect with the spirits a lot, but in this case, in this time that we live in, the understanding of highlighting great musicians, artists, and also great human beings who have gotten the memo about giving it forward, passing the music on to future generations. At this time, it's the only thing I know how to do to inspire positive change in my life, and it's great to bring back a cat who, was in high school watching Reggie Jackson play football, and then continued on into Gotham and became a studio mainstay and a leader in his own right, and probably trying to take up as much time as possible because he's normally on the road doing all types of different things. It's great to reconnect with him. Randy Brecker, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Well, thanks, Jake. It's good to talk to you again.
It's good to talk to you, man. How can you talk about your, I know you're busy, you're keeping yourself busy, but you're not doing what you truly love to do, and I just wonder how sane you are these days.
Well, it comes in waves. Generally, we're doing pretty good. We could be a lot worse off. I'm with my wife, Ada Rovati, and our kid, Stella. And we're just trying to stay busy. Stella's in school during the day, and she's playing alto and loves playing baritone, actually, even though it's bigger than she is. So we've been doing little home projects. There's been released 2 or 3 little videos. We're not posting too much stuff because there's so much stuff being posted, and this is going to be a long haul, so we're trying to figure out just some kind of longer-term plan as things settle in for whatever they're going to settle in for. But I've been practicing every day, keeping my chops up. Ada's been practicing, and maybe I'll even write something. We'll see. I haven't been writing the last couple of years, but you don't know what's going. I mean, up until this time, what was the longest period of time that you were off the bandstand? Well, that's a good question. It was always off and on, but I don't think I'd ever been off for more than 3 weeks. I didn't do long tours. So the last year I kind of got caught short. It's kind of ironic in a way because the last 3 months of 2019 I was gone practically the whole time. Maybe come back for a day or two. I was playing with Billy Cobham. We hadn't played together in a long time. We did a statewide U.S. tour, and that backed up against a tour with Dave Liedman and Mark Copeland and Joey Barron in Europe, and that backed up against another thing which took me home for a second and back. So basically I was gone most of almost the last 3 months. So I was happy to get back, but certainly didn't see this coming where everything got just canceled, and that's a tough one for, of course, all musicians, because we like being on the bandstand and communicating with the other musicians, and just as importantly with the audience. So this is a tough one to swallow.
I mean, it's like, I don't think words even do justice to it. There's one cat. There's a bunch of things I have to. It's just I'm so happy to hear your voice, but I saw you play on a bill last year and. In the spring, I told my dad to go because he is this cat who was very important to me early on in connecting me with a lot of mercurial studio musicians was Jack Kleinsinger. When did you first connect with him?
Well, that's a good one. This was years and years ago, man. Probably the 70s.
Definitely the 70s. Yeah, definitely the 70s.
And probably early 70s. I remember him on several of his programs down in Tribeca, the last of which he nicely billed it as a tribute to me.
That's what it was. It was a tribute to Randy. That's why I was like, Dad, you got to go to this. A tribute to Brecker.
Yeah, and it was a lot of fun with some younger cats that I did that are helping him out. Two young brothers, the Anderson brothers, and there were some, some of my compatriots that I've been playing with, Buster Williams and George Cables. We go back a long time, and we just called some tunes. They had a general plan. The twin brothers are both saxophone players, and we had a ball playing. That was the main thing.
I think I'm trying to go back in my memory bank. Oh, I was talking to the guitarist Bruce Foreman, who came up literally across the street from Kezar Stadium in high school, went to a minority high school, and Ed Kelly would come in and demonstrate the B3. But when he actually got on the bandstand with Larry Bradford, or it could have been whoever, he just said that, and this is the thing that keeps dragging me towards this magnet to your generation, is just, he said the support of the community of jazz. It was this eclectic group of weird geniuses that just all supported each other in some way. Obviously, there was some friction here and there, but in every pocket of the country, Randy, I mean, that's what made the jazz so amazing. When I can see it, I can see, you talk about Buster and George. It's like, I'm not trying to go back in a time capsule. I'm trying to say, what are the tenets? I mean, the music. Shelly Manne came out of. He was raised by Coleman Hawkins. It just seemed to me like there was this infectious community of support, and then there was all these just interesting, different cats who could play their asses off. And I guess that's probably the reason I started my show. I've just been longing for that community, and I wonder if you, even in these times, can still. I mean, you just went out with Billy and Joey Barron, all these guys, Liebman, these guys you've been playing with for 50 years. But you do recognize that there is resonance to the essence of that time. That's what it is. There's just, the essence will continue to pervade even through these times. And I wonder if you use that as just sort of psychologically, just sort of how often that comes into your zeitgeist.
Well, you're kind of told as a musician not to look back, to look forward. But since we don't know what looking forward looks like, I don't feel guilty about kind of
yeah, right. Don't feel guilty.
Everything, and that's one of the things that's strange that you mentioned that has been keeping me afloat. Is just I was always a history buff, but I'm particularly a jazz history buff, so I enjoy just kind of connecting the dots from the beginning to the present, So I've spent a lot of time the last few weeks just kind of researching stuff and popping on, and not only in respect to my own career, but just the general history of the music. For instance, last week I got heavily involved. I'm from Philadelphia.
Of course.
And I just kind of researched not only the jazz history of Philly is well known, but the fact that jazz and jazz musicians were so closely allied to all the pop and disco and soul, Gamble and Huff, Sal Soul Orchestra, a guy named Vince Montana.
Yeah.
These are names you probably don't even know.
Oh, no, I know them very well. The Sigma Sound,
oh,
yeah.
Good, okay.
Yeah.
So I just kind of spent a couple days. I knew all those guys when I was a kid. I'd go hear all these guys play at a small club in South Philly before all the.
What was the name of the club? What was the name of the club?
Well, that's the one thing I can't remember.
Oh my God! You saw the Sigma Sound Wrecking Crew live all the time?
Yeah, well, it wasn't all the time. My memory was it was on the second floor. It was in South Philly in the Italian section, and it was only open, I think, Sunday afternoons. I don't think it wasn't a full-time jazz club. It was more like a family musician hangout. And these guys would play from 2 to 5 Sunday afternoon. Vince Montana, Buddy Savitt, a guy named John Bonney, who was on all. And they were a lot of the guys that especially Vince Montana, ended up producing a lot of the pop records for Gamble and Huff and the Cameo Parkway, and eventually started. He was really the guy behind the scenes, and they were all jazzers. You know, I happened upon Buddy Savitt's website, and I had no idea. I just knew him as this great bebop saxophone player, formerly with Woody Herman, et cetera, et cetera. And there he is on all these R&B records out of Cameo Parkway and then Philly International. It was amazing to put all the pieces together. So that's another thing I've been doing in my spare time, is just listening and watching a lot of music and just kind of putting all the pieces together.
Yeah, I think you not only not feel guilty, Jewish guilt, but I mean also you should feel like it's completely appropriate because it's feeding you spiritually in a pretty desolate time. And I you know, I wanted to read this to you. This is from I'm not sure if you ever played with the drummer Jerry Granelli, but
yeah, I know of him. I don't think I ever played with him, but he was well known in the Philly area, actually, too.
In the Philly area, really?
Well, yeah, through I forget the connection, but I had heard about him. He's from the West Coast, right? Mainly.
Yeah, he was the drummer with Vince Guaraldi with Bolasette Records and but I just want to read you. I want to read you.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to read you this quote from an interview I did with him, and then just have you extrapolate. He said, this is a couple years ago. He goes, I was just in San Francisco. I was staying out by the Haight, and there was a place called the Happy House that was run by the Williams couple. They were straight arrow music lovers, huge jazz fans who loved the musicians as well. They liked being around the creative energy and liked supporting it. Flip Nunez lived in the basement. Dewey Redman lived upstairs. Tony Williams stayed there. Eddie Moore stayed there for a while. Stanley Willits even stayed there. Billy Hart stayed there. They had a beautiful grand piano in the living room so you could play there. They were into people coming in at 4 a.m. and playing in the living room. And I, you know, whether it was Philly, I know the stories of the Baroness in New York, but you mentioned that this Vince Montana, it was sort of more like a communal jazz society more than a club. But was there like a familial house or anything close to that you can recollect? It seems to me like that's where jazz came out of the communities, and there was a happy house in almost every community.
Yeah, well, that place, I'm sorry I can't remember the name.
You got to dig into
one
that.
One of them were, you know, I had just started to drive. I was probably 16 or 17 years old, and I was too timid to talk to these guys because they were kind of larger than life. But there also were other spots, mostly clubs, local clubs, and I unfortunately, the hangouts, because I was so young, I don't remember the names, but there was a good club that I actually played at a few times in North Philly off Broad Street, which would feature local guys that never really got out of Philly, but great players, Sam Reed and Jimmy Oliver.
Sam Reed was Buster Williams' mentor.
Yeah. And he ended up leading the band at a place which was also a gathering place, the Uptown Theater, where they had a lot of not only jazz but R&B acts, and he led the house band there.
Well, that was the legendary. I mean, Donald Duck Bailey, the great drummer, used to. I mean, the line was out the door. Did you play Peps or Spider Kelly's?
Well, Spider Kelly's, I think, is Pittsburgh. I might be wrong.
No, Spider Kelly's is Phil. Odine Pope used to play there. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of there's a drummer.
Yeah, no, so you're thinking of Spider Webb, the drummer.
Yeah,
great
okay.
cat. Yeah, no,
Old age.
Crawford's Grill, I think, is Pittsburgh.
I played Peps in the Showboat, which later became the Bijou.
Oh, really? See, that's new history. I didn't know it became the Bijou.
Yeah, the Showboat was taken over by a guy named Larry Magid, who was a big promoter in Philly. I think I got that name right. You know, a lot of this stuff.
It's all right. I like that you're diving into it, dude.
Yeah, and he was a big promoter, but a jazz fan. I mean, he promoted shows at the Spectrum, and he had his own. I think he had a venue actually in West Philly, another one, but he ended up buying or taking over the Showboat, which eventually got changed to the Bijou, and I played both in larger venues. I'm not sure if he's still with us or still active. But,
How do you spell his last name? Or you don't know?
Magid, I think.
Magid.
Yeah, Larry Magid.
Well, we have a game that we like to play on this program called Name That Voice. I'm interested if you can peg this. We'll take a listen to it, and we'll come back.
Well, we listen to one another, and that's also, it's like a conversational skill. If you want to be a good conversationalist, then you have to be a good listener. If you're always thinking about what you want to do, then you're really not being a listener. And so I remember I did a clinic one time with Randy Brecker, and it was for a bunch of high school kids. It was kind of this all-star sort of band. A really, really fun day. And we played with kids all day and talked to them, and had a little concert, and gave them a chance to play with all of us and all that. And one of the kids at the end, stood up and he said, if there was one thing that you would want us to take from this day, there's one thing that we could use, important thing. What would that be? And so he paused for a minute, and he said, well, listen. Learn to listen to one another. Learn to listen. That's probably the most valuable musical skill, if you want to be in a band and work with people, is to learn how to listen. And it was profound. I mean, I've never forgotten it.
You want to take a guess at who that is? I know the connection wasn't great, but you want to take a guess at who that is?
Yeah, no, I don't have a clue. It sounded familiar, but
No, you do. There's no reason you would have a clue, because, but he's a great cat. I heard he retired, and I don't know if that's true or not. That was David Garibaldi.
Oh man, well I haven't. That's amazing.
Yeah, well, what I'm saying is that was from an interview I did with him from 2014. So Brecker's been like in the milieu. Everyone's been in the milieu for,
Yeah, we did play together, and we did a couple workshops years and years ago. And I actually, we were friends. We'd recognize each other
of course.
Gigs and talk to each other, but I haven't really talked to him in years. And
well, no, this is
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm glad he retired, but sorry at the same time, because he's such an original drummer. I mean, nobody will ever play like he did or does. I'm sure he's still playing, but maybe not with Tower of Power. And vaguely, I remember him sitting at probably at that clinic.
Yeah.
I remember kind of the room and everything, and him sitting on the drums, because it was a thrill for me. I don't think I'd really played with him before. And as far as that one-word answer, listen, I must say I got that from John Hendricks, who had written in one of those records that sentiment where there was some kind of rhyme, but the punchline was just listen. And it's it is really true, though. I mean, the most important thing you need to do as a player, and that's what we all sadly miss, is being in the mix of the music and learning not to, exactly what he was saying, not to just think of yourself, but place yourself in the midst of the sound and respond.
Well, the earlier part of the quote that I didn't play for you was he was talking about a lot of bands fall apart because people aren't willing to meet in the middle. And he was talking about Rocco and him specifically, like you couldn't ask for diametrically opposed, approaches where Garibaldi, even though he's got great feel and like just so cool, he's an academic cat. He writes books. He studies very hard, and then Rocco is like, well, just give me the bass, and so they don't even talk about what they play. They just play. They just listen to each other. That's what he was referring to, and then he led into the story about you talking to that cat. What do you want me to take away from this? And you said, just listen, because my generation, I mean, there's nothing worse than people yelling at other people on the bandstand musically. That's not the quality of jazz or the music that I want to listen, that anyone wants to hear. And I just wonder if you weren't in a rhythm section, but was there any kind of relationship you had musically where it was always a case where you never had to talk about anything, you just played, and you just listened to each other? I mean, is that fair that was?
Yeah, that's really accurate, and a short answer is that's what I had with my brother, and that's what I've come to have with my wife. Although that was a process, but where we could really understand what we're each doing, and it's just really comfortable playing with her. But with Mike, it was almost like a sixth sense. The first time we played together, we just heard things the same way, the nuances, how to phrase certain things, where to put vibrato, how to put just how to phrase, and the little nuances that go with phrasing. We never had to talk about it. We never had to talk about pitch. We just played, and that came from us playing when we were kids. We had a adjoining suite, which was joined by a very live bathroom. So we used to Mike was playing clarinet at the time, and I was playing trumpet, and we liked the echo, so we'd go in there and just play anything. And that's where it all started. But not only with my brother, but the guys that I've been closely associated with throughout the years, and those are all the guys in various Brecker Brothers band, even though those weren't, parts were quite delineated, but there was a degree of brotherhood in that band that was like Tower Power, it was just
exactly.
We hung out together, we ate together, we almost lived with. If we could have lived together in the same room, we would have been happy doing it. And it's the same with the cats that I've been associated with, all these, Leibs and Mark Copeland, Joey, and that sphere. The camaraderie was a big part of it, and it all came out in the music. We just trusted each other. That was another word, that came up. You trust everybody's instincts. So if it went out on a limb, trusted everybody to there was no negativity when somebody, for lack of a better word, got lost. So in fact, we used to get lost in certain situations on purpose just to find our way back and see how we could do it.
Oh, I love it. I mean, in a live setting, like just jamming out, or in front of people.
Yeah, especially at jam sessions, even when we play live, I think that was part of the methodology behind when I finally started to understand it. Behind Miles's great quintet with Herbie and Wayne and Tony and Ron, they would just take chances and go out in left field somewhere, and you weren't sure if they were following the form or not. I used to think they were trying to follow some kind of form, but Mike told me, eventually got to play with Herbie a lot, and Herbie, just as much as he knew about form, he loved it when just things went out to right field, left field, get lost, just take a chance, and they just trusted each other to make music out of whatever happened, and eventually find their way back to the form if there was a form. So I listened to a lot of different things in a whole more mature way now. I kind of think I understand things a lot more than I did when I was younger listening to this stuff.
Can you talk a little bit about the evolution of the trust with your wife as far as listening together, how that evolved?
Well, we've been married, I think it's going to be 20 years.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah. And she's just improved, man. I mean, I've made certain little improvements, I think, but I don't think I've been around someone who made that much improvement. And she was always very knowledgeable about things, but she started late. She didn't start playing saxophone until she was 17. Huh. And she came when we first got together, we were deeply in love, but she had a lot of insecurities about her playing. I guess in a way she still does, but I'm tough love. I'll tell her the truth. And I also give her compliments. And she really made so many strides. I just can't believe how great she's playing now. And I wouldn't have said that 10 years ago.
She's being herself, you think? She's finding she's really found her own voice?
Well, that's that she's always had, because she's approached music a lot different than I have. Her approach is a lot more in a way like and expanding our vocabulary. Still there?
I'm here, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So she's approached it from a whole other standpoint. She doesn't know much about the whole history of the music, and she's investigated just harmony and theory a lot more than I have. And it took a minute for us to find a meeting of the minds. It was kind of a slower process, especially when we were playing stuff. She ended up taking, when Mike passed 13 years ago, we had a bunch of, in fact, when he got sick, which was 15, 16 years ago, she ended up taking his place in the band. We had a bunch of gigs booked. In fact, we were supposed to go to Russia the weekend that he was taken ill and couldn't go. And she was just coming with me to Russia with the band just to sightsee and be there, because it was an exciting trip, and she ended up playing. Igor, my good friend Igor Bootman, we played at his club, and he sponsored the whole thing. And she just had her own thing going, even back then. She didn't try to sound like Mike. Her approach was similar, but she's just had her own. It's hard to describe. There's some Mike in there. There's some Wayne, maybe. There's some Bob Mincer. She transcribed a lot of his solos, but she's always just had her own harmonic and sonic. Her sound has been herself, and it's only ripened with age now. And she's just her time came together the last few years. Her conception and the way she builds solos. I remember. I'll just say this story because this was proof of.
Go ahead.
This. We were on the jazz cruise. We've been doing that together with our various bands, different things every year for the last 10 years. And we also do other things when we're on the cruise, and she was asked by Brian Lynch to be a part of his band. He was presenting the Latin side of jazz, and they had hired Arturo's Sandoval's rhythm section, and Ada and Dick Oates were the front line. But he, unbeknownst to her, had a ton of music. They didn't get to rehearse. She was asking about the whole thing, and they barely had a rehearsal, playing hard tunes, hard arrangements, Latin impressions of, they did Countdown, they did Giant Steps. These were hard tunes.
Yeah. And
she was just amazing. I mean, I was in the audience. The way she built the solos, all three of them actually, but I'm prejudiced in a way, but she was fantastic. Pretty much sight reading everything, playing through the changes, the way she built the solos. The whole band was just fabulous. They were all panicking before they went out there because there wasn't enough rehearsal. But it just seemed like everything that she'd been working for coalesced during that concert. I remember Dick Oates took me aside, and I'm a big fan of his too, and he sounded great, but he pulled me aside and said, man, the way Ada built those solos was just amazing. So it's just not my prejudice. She's really found something unique, and I'm just very proud of her, as you can tell.
Well, I mean,
I just love playing with her. It fits like a glove now. Plus, it's so meaningful because we really have a life together. It was similar to the feeling playing with Mike. So it's great to keep that whole thing kind of in the family. It feels like family.
Yeah, I mean, you're totally blessed. I mean, you're being watched over, and it's like, I mean, and just the idea that even in this quarantine extended pause or whatever, that you guys can maybe just take things out and lose the form and just play together. I mean, I've talked to other cats who, their wives or significant others play. They've cleared out a closet if they live in Brooklyn so they can, just sort of shed a little bit or play. And and that's, but we're talking to a guy who's been on many sessions, but this is actually from one of your albums as a leader. Let's see if you can nail this, and then we'll come back.
Okay.
right, Mr. Brecker, what do you got for us?
Well, that one I could nail in 2 seconds because that was an unforgettable moment in my life, and we miss Larry Coryell so much. And that just the fact that part you played where we were improvising together illustrates the point about listening.
Exactly.
We also had just a natural affinity. That duet, you might call it, or that section, almost feels like it's composed. One thing so logically led to another, and we're bouncing back and forth between each other. So that was a nice little thing to hear right now. So thanks for that.
You remember the name of the tune?
Yeah, that's called the Marble Sea. And
I love that. I listened to it last night, and I'm like, dude, the conversation. We haven't in our interviews have never touched on the 11th House, but Coryell, like when he came to New York, he was playing. He was so humbled when he came there. He didn't consider himself. I remember doing my interviews with him, and he was living on brown rice and barely surviving. But he was playing like wet. It was just you and him were just that was the filthiest call and response, whatever it was, and it wasn't composed. It was totally improv, and you just because you were listening. And that's the magic of it, man. That's actually...
Well, he was another guy, you might know the story, but we met before he moved to New York.
Oh, I don't know the story. No, I don't know.
Yeah, okay, well, I'll tell you the story because it's pretty interesting, actually. I was 19 years old. I forget, the year would be probably 64, or maybe it was the summer of 60. I think it was the summer of 64. Yeah. I went out to Seattle. I had a girlfriend at Indiana University, and she couldn't come back, and I was crestfallen. So my parents enrolled me in a couple classes. That was part of the deal if I was to go out there all summer.
Sure.
At the University of Washington, which was great. I took a couple writing courses, English. I was a liberal arts major at the time. Fascinating courses. But the summer scene in Seattle that summer was unbelievable. Coming from Philly, I was coming from a pretty amazing musical environment, so for starters. But the scene that summer in Seattle was just absolutely unforgettable. And the most prized thing I took out of it was the fact that a young guy, a crew cut guy, had with kind of thick glasses, had an organ trio at a club, a nightly, 6 nights a week, called the Embers, and they just played standards. And he also was adept, and I hadn't really heard this before from a guitarist because he had been born in Galveston, Texas. Had a whole blues methodology along with his bebop, and that was in fact Larry Coryell. And I used to go there,
unbelievable, holy,
and sit in with him. We became fast friends.
Oh, that is so cool.
And I went back to home after the summer. I'll tell you more about the summer because it was not only Larry.
Oh, dude, it must have been burning, the most burning, insane. I mean, it's so classic that you went from the hotbed of Philly to the hotbed of Seattle. So continue.
Well, make a long story short, I went home, and maybe much as a year passed, and I hadn't stayed in touch with Larry, but I was back in Philly, and I was listening to the Chico Hamilton Quintet featuring Ron Carter at, I forget if it was the Showboat or called the Beat, and Chico would yell out, "Okay, Texas, Texas," and he'd go into blues, and I looked closer, and I said, "Holy shit, that's Larry." I didn't even recognize him. He looked so different because in Seattle he was a crew cut, respectable.
Right, and then he's like in sandals or bare feet, now. Then yeah.
And then we hooked up. I was moving to New York, and he had just started also the Free Spirits, so that was a big influence on everyone. When I moved to New York, he was everyone's guru with the Free Spirits, with the great Jim Pepper, who was a big influence on my brother. I played Mike Wuchitaito. Mike was also on the record you played, and
of course he was.
That's the whole he's not on that track, which is the Marble Sea, but that's from my original first record score that Larry plays on half, Hal Galper is on half, and my brother, who was 19 and a half, I flew to New York because I had heard him play in Chicago, and by then he was really almost the Michael Brecker we know. He was kind of polished diamond in the rough. And I said, I had this record in mind, so I flew him in. Imagine being 19 and then your first gig, professional, like in New York, as a record date with Larry Coryell and Eddie Gomez. Who else was?
Rokes was on it. Jerry
Rokes,
Dodgian was on it.
I think is on some of it, and Duke Pearson producing. So that's the story behind Larry. We stayed fast friends in the 11th house, and we had a bunch of plans because we did a little 11th House record shortly before he and Muzan passed away, sadly.
I interviewed him in 2015. He talked to me about you and him. I don't know if the record ever got made. I think you guys were going to maybe tour it or something. But he said, he said he said to me, I have it on. It's pretty amazing. He said, next time I'm in Tucson, I'll come over and we'll play it together. We'll listen to it together. And there's so much going through my head right now. Did you meet? This was actually the first record I ever got of you as a leader. It was just like in a record store here in Tucson. And would you say that Manny Album or Duke Pearson got you your record deal? How did that work?
Well, I knew Manny and was good friends with him, and we miss him very much. But Duke got me the record deal.
Can you talk about Duke Pearson, man? The guy was a mensch. I mean, literally, like with Cranshaw and Roker, he taught Mickey how to taught him how to read. I mean, they were up in the.
That's true.
It's insane.
Well, I came to New York in September of '65, and by the end of the year, I was just blessed, mainly from having played some collegiate jazz festivals where people were judges like Mel Lewis or Clark Terry in particular, liked my playing at the festivals. And when I moved to New York, Clark hired me for his big band, and also played in Thad and Mel. Mel hired me to play in Thad and Mel's band, which I did for about a year until I joined Horace. But through that, Duke Pearson also heard about me. My good friend Marvin Stamm had come to town around the same time. He was about 5 years older, but when Duke was asking about a young trumpet player, I think it probably was Marvin who recommended me to Duke's band, and that was just a big thrill. Duke's writing, there were some of my favorite tunes. I named my daughter Amanda after one of his tunes, which is called Amanda.
Are you kidding? That is on. And you're on that album?
No, I'm not on it, but I was as a high school man. That was one of my favorite records, and I loved it.
I'm gonna have to dig that up. Holy cow!
In fact, when she got married 2 years ago, Amanda got married, and we Ada and I played that tune. We taught the band at the wedding. It's an easy tune to learn, so we played Duke's Amanda at the wedding. But he was just a wonderful guy, just heartfelt, all heart, great piano player, and he had a certain style. He was a producer for Blue Note. I was signed to, he was the one who signed me to Solid State, which was actually Blue Note, but that's, for lack of a better way of explaining, that's where they put the white guys.
I was going to say, I mean, I've never heard that Solid State was the
There were other people on that.
Wait, so the Solid State was for the white, but I mean, like Mel Lewis and Thad Jones was on Solid State.
Yeah.
It was just more like, it wasn't the Grant Green.
It wasn't. The Blue Note had a certain image and understood. That's my favorite label of all time.
All time.
Well, they didn't want to kind of, what's the word? Sully the image of
sully it, yeah. Sully the image.
It was because the record, from the record covers to the sound, that was like the perfect label of all time. But Solid State was actually the same exact office. Same people working on both things. And Solid State did pretty well, I mean, with Thad and Mel's band and various other people they had signed.
There's a cat, I'm so glad that I looked at my notes here. I need you to talk to me about this cat, Cecil Holmes.
Cecil Holmes, man,
Is that going?
what,
Is that going back in the? I mean, you're on this. Cecil was. I have to go pull it out again, but he had this soulful, kind of like a Philadelphia soul syndicate. And you're on one of these one of these with like. I had it in my phone here for a second. Let me see.
Yeah, well, those years there were so many dates, man. That's the thing. I was doing like 10 sessions a day, and some of them just went in one ear, and some of them didn't mean that they weren't great sessions, but if they were real well organized, you play, you read the music, and you split. So the name sounds familiar.
It was a Gamble and Huff. No, it was 73. It was called the Cecil Holmes Soulful Sounds. And you had guys like Brecker. Bob Babbitt played bass. And Jerry Friedman. Let's talk about this cat for a minute. One of the most insane guitar players of all time. I've seen him on Tim Buckley records, but apparently he was playing solos on like insane blues albums. You knew Jerry?
Yeah, I knew not that well, but I knew him. We actually played one of his compositions on one of the Brecker Brothers records. It was not a great tune, but it was a disco tune called "Don't Stop the Music." But he was a first call guitarist. He also was a fine violinist, and I remember we spent some weeks in the Catskills together when we were really young at a gig playing at a hotel, maybe for a month. And a wonderful guy, sadly passed away also, I don't know, 3 or 4 or several years ago, and I'd kind of lost touch with him. But he was really positive thinker and just a first call studio cat, as we were called.
Oh, you are the studio cat, man. I mean, I just want to say, for the record, I try to find a little bit of peace every day. And try to appreciate that. And a lot of times it's through music. And, for some reason I don't prepare a lot for a lot of interviews, but with you, I always like to keep you interested. So I'm listening to this, and I forgot how much I listened to these. We let in with that Mark Murphy on the Red Clay. I don't know, like that, and that was your trumpet solo that we led into this interview. And that was you blowing away, and I'm like, damn! I'm like, he's playing. I mean, I would hope that if Freddie Hubbard heard that tune, he would have been proud of it, because you were playing your ass off on that.
Well, thanks, man. I wasn't sure what the record was, even that. I knew it was me, and I remember scuffling through a couple written lines there, but that's a really good record. He did 2 or 3 with us, me, Mike, and Sanborn, and.
Dude, I'm telling you, man, like I was listening Mark Murphy, man, rest in peace. I mean, the New York he did Bridging a Gap with you and your brother and Pat Rebelo and Ron and then a guy who I interviewed a long time ago who, like, the most humble cat in the world is Jimmy Madison. A sick drummer, man.
Oh yeah,
unreal, man.
Well, he was a pretty much first call guy, played on a lot of records too, and could play any kind of style, from James Brown, with whom I'm pretty sure he's on a lot of those records, to swing and bebop. He could play anything. As most of the really good players could play in a lot of different styles, so that's why you see so many jazz musicians.
I know, dude. I believe me. This
records.
is
They don't get enough credit. The fact that on all. Best musicians in town, so they could adapt to anything.
Did you, like, Born to Run, did you come in and overdub your part? Did you hang with Bruce? Do you remember what that session was like?
Well, yeah, I remember. It's funny because that was the sessions that I remember were sessions where something kind of funny or screwy happened. And, that's why I'm sure the Cecil record was probably just, we came in, I get asked about, for instance, Berlin, other records. I had a friend, it's funny, I just happened to, last night, and I'll get back to your question.
Sure, no problem.
but I did a lot of work for a producer. I could never remember his last name. I remember it was Bob. And I was online last night doing my thing, looking around, researching, and saw it might have even been one of your interviews, Alan Schwartzberg, talking about Bob Ezrin. And then after all these years, I said, of course, Bob Ezrin.
Oh, my, dude, I just transcribed that. Yeah, when he said the name, I didn't know. I was listening back to the interview because it's always very, happenstance, what I just depend on what I transcribe. And he's talking about this story about, it's an Alice Cooper session. I'm just so, this is why I do the show, because of the 6 degrees of separation. There he is, Bob Ezrin, boom.
Yeah, so that opened up that was last night. I found a bunch of interviews from Bob. He was very helpful and got me on a lot of really great records like Lou Reed's I'm on Berlin. But his sessions were always really well organized, so I don't have any memory of any of them. Because he was just really thorough, so you just go in, the music was there, you read the music, thank you, and see you later, and then it all goes in one ear and out the other. I had lunch with Lou Reed. That's all I remember about Berlin, me and Mike and Bob Ezrin, who now I thankfully remember his last name. Anyway, with regards to the Born to Run session, Mike and I and Sanborn and a wonderful trombone player, Wayne Andre, were on that. And we show up to this session, which was at the Hit Factory. And I did know Bruce. We had hung out a couple times, just kind of, at a club. And I remember I was over at his apartment or something. A girl I was seeing was his manager's secretary. So somehow...
Was he had some, according to Max Weinberg, he could play some jazz on the guitar.
Well, I never heard of him.
That's okay. I just wanted to know. I wanted to know if you ever saw it. Yeah.
Songwriter.
Yeah. Anyway, yes, you were hanging with him, and yeah.
So I did know him a bit personally.
Sure.
I forget the circumstance. I just remember being in a bar, and also I don't know if it was his apartment or someone else's, doing something. I forget. But we show up to the session, and there's music on the stand, but there's no notes on the music. It says 10th Avenue Freeze Out.
Oh, man.
A blank sheet of paper. And we're looking at each other and we're saying, we weren't really hired to do an arrangement. Plus, 10th Avenue Freeze Out was a little out of our comfort zone, because it was really rock and roll. Particularly me and Mike and Sanborn, if it was in our comfort zone, we were great at jamming up parts. It
Sure.
would have been a little more in the R&B or funk element. But we were kind of stymied by this. And we worked hard at it, but it was like pulling teeth. A couple hours went by, and we had the nucleus of an arrangement. Wayne was helping out. He was really out of his element. He was an older cat.
I love this, dude.
Yeah. So
I love this.
We're a couple hours into it, and all of a sudden in the booth, the door opens, and it's like a fireball through the door. This guy comes in saying, "Wait a minute, that sounds terrible. That's not it. That sounds terrible." And we're like taken aback, and it turns out that was Miami Steve Van Zandt. That's the way we met.
Oh man!
and there's an interview I've heard telling the same story from his perspective, and then when he found out who we were, the supposed king of the studio cats, he got embarrassed that he kind of treated us with kind of disrespect. It's kind of funny, but anyway.
Let me just ask you: Were you jamming the parts out? Were you cutting it live with everybody, and you just were having to do take after take, or were these like overdub kind of things?
Well, this was all. Steve wasn't. And he turned out to be a great guy. He really helped us. We started all over. He just really didn't like what we had done. I don't know if we had recorded anything. Yeah, we must have recorded something, but it just wasn't right for the tune. So he hummed some lines, and between the 5 of us, we came up with an arrangement. It was mostly his ideas, and we were good at voicing it, so we had some voicings, and we got the tune done. But that's something I'll never forget, just him bursting through the door. That sounds terrible. So I remember that one. And then also I played on Meeting Across the River, which was also an overdub where I could just play. I just played what I felt. There was no arrangement, so I improvised over that tune, which was a lot of fun to
do. I just think it was. I wanted to ask you about. You talk about the history of the music, and some people are incredibly articulate at talking about the direct connection between Duke Ellington and the way he used to feature soloists like Paul Gonzalez and people like that. And Chris Parker told me in a very eloquent way that, he thought that Duke's band and the way that, that he would allow for individual soloists to play as many bars as they wanted was a kind of a direct link to Monk and sort of the smaller band jazz. And you were talking about, being a buff, just sort of, poking around and looking at the history of the music. I'm also fascinated by it, and I kind of wanted you to talk a little bit about, in your mind, the link from, going from big band arrangements of essentially American songbook stuff with lots of orchestrated parts to the beginnings of, individual improvisation and in your mind how that evolved from maybe the 40s through the 60s.
Well, my only personal connection with that evolution was having played in Charles Mingus's big band.
When was that?
After he passed. Well, I played on his last couple records.
Oh, okay.
Me, Myself, and I. And then after he passed away, I think it was in '79. I might have the date wrong. Sue Mingus started the Charles Mingus big band, and I was in it. Until I moved out here, close to 15 years. We played it every week in New York, and we did a lot of tours, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, we did some crazy tours. The band was full of crazy maniacs. We were all nuts. But playing that music was really a direct grew out of Duke's conception of writing, but featuring even within the voicings. The way he voiced stuff, each individual was amazing, still is amazing to me. I get chills when I just heard, there was a video of Isfahan alive where Duke is standing in front of, nobody knows why, with the music in front of Johnny Hodges, but Johnny knew the tune. He never looked at the music. Maybe it was something for the director wanted him to do or something, but you hear each individual part, and the way Duke would arrange the stuff for Billy Strayhorn, they were like just Siamese twins in a way. Their writing was so similar and influenced each other so much. You just hear all the individual voices and little solos, like 3 notes that Harry Carney did in the arrangement that pop out of the thing. It's just amazing that he was able to have a big band with such individuality of all the players come out not only in the solos but in the writing. And Mingus was a direct descendant of that, so that was really my only connection. Mingus had that gift too of writing ensemble parts, but there were always intricate little inner parts that would stick out. And he.
Is there something you could hit the audience like like in his earlier like in the earlier times before you started playing with him? Is there some examples of that, like a big band record that you can point to where he did that?
In 1949, I somehow remember the date, but I don't think I can remember the name of the tune because we used to play it.
Really? So this was off an album. You have to look it up.
It's one of his earliest big band arrangements, but you really hear the style in there. And also, in a larger sense, although this piece was never performed where it was to rehearse his masterwork Epitaph, which is
Right.
400 pages and goes on for, I don't know, a couple hours. There's a lot of that in there. If I can just choose that as kind of number one, because it is his probably masterwork, and I was lucky enough to play on the concert, the original concert when they've assembled the whole thing, which was quite an experience in itself, because there was so much music that we hadn't rehearsed a lot of it, and the computer was actually spewing the parts out during the concert. And we were putting them on our stand site. Great band, Winton was in the band, Snooky Young, all Jimmy Nepper. Maybe he wasn't in it. I think he was at the concert. But it was that's really the continuum as I see it. And of course, everyone writes with a little bit of Duke in there. But he was just, as time goes on, his stature rises as far as I'm concerned. It's part of my going back in time.
No, I mean, I could spend like another hour with you on this because it's really important, but I wonder, before we wrap up here,
Sure.
You had 7th Avenue South, told the epic story of Miles with his bug sunglasses on, and you introduced yourself, and then he was just sort of stared at you, and then you started to drown yourself in vodka tonics, and then he came over and was like, you like your wah wah, I like my wah wah, and that. But I want you to talk to the people. I don't care if it's landlords, real estate owners, people. Randy, here's the existential crisis in my mind, long term for music in general, is that you're seeing this idea of having to how many clubs are going to survive, how many clubs are going to come back, and truthfully, a lot would if we lived in a time when people believed that the government could subsidize for a couple of years and allow people to get back on their feet. And I want you to just talk to, not the musicians, because there's amazing musicians out there everywhere, and they deserve to be paid, sing for their supper. And I just want you to talk to the people with the money about why, or the people that, when the investments are made, why arts and culture and venues should be at the top and not the bottom.
Yeah, it's very true, and I just hope that people that are in power in the music business too can pass that information on to our sadly wobbled government. There's little murmurs of hope coming but I think it was just killed in the Senator of the House Republicans killed it, of extensive money for the arts, but I'll believe it when I see it.
Those people are they're like nihilists, man. They don't get it.
But sadly, I just read this article. In fact, I had printed it out by a guy named William Ralston, and the title of the article was "Coronavirus Might Kill the Music Industry. Maybe it needed to die."
Right.
Because the things were so dire before all this started, with what musicians were getting paid for their intellectual property. The whole thing was just so, it all boiled down to going on the road, because you don't get paid for the records, you don't get paid for writing tunes. That's another reason, kind of, I hate to say it, why I kind of lost interest in, in writing, because there was always a component. When I was writing, I enjoyed the process, but I knew I was going to get paid something. And with that out the window, I kind of started to focus more on the trumpet. So the sad thing is, the actual music is being lost in this. And my only hope is that musicians can somehow get subsidized. If you're not out playing, it's a challenge to keep the whole thing up, because you just got to stay in the practice room. We're going to probably be staying in the practice room for as much as a year now. This is unheard of.
Well, it's also, I mean, you guys have to stay. I mean, my parents live in Stony Brook, and it's like you guys are the most susceptible to this virus. I mean, it's just like
we have to be careful.
Yeah, man. I mean, but I mean, if you were sitting in front of a Senate panel with Billy and Liebman, and and the spirits of Grolnick and Mike were looking down, and they were just giving you this BS about, music is unquantifiable, and there's no, how can we put a price tag on it? There's no data to support that it involves, that it helps the economy. What would you say to them?
Well, I would say that music is the most important thing in most people's lives, except for yours. It seems politicians or somebody like Donald Trump with it. That's what's so obvious about him. There's just no
Soul.
Feeling of art or music, and this is what This is what makes people soulful. The arts, not only music, but all the arts. Since we're specifically talking about music, we need music. I mean, it'll be sadly missed if it doesn't come back in full swing, and people have to get over the idea. And this is people who buy music, that it's worth a lot more than they're paying for it, and it certainly shouldn't be sold for free. So that was the problem before this started. Hopefully, that's what this article touched about. Maybe when it gets restructured, we can all be a little wiser, not give it away. I've always been a stickler for that. If gigs didn't pay enough, I wouldn't do them. I charge as much as I can, because money's, my good friend Cafe de Souza said this recently. We had him on our Brecker meets Ravati, plays Ravati record, and he's an old friend of mine. He charged a decent amount of money, and he took me by the shoulder and said, Randy, money's important too. And
you're damn right it is. I mean, and the thing is that, I mean, connecting with my peers in today's world, the way they even scuffle by is by road dogging it. I mean, at least in the past, a record could have been potentially made, Brecker Brothers record or Bruce Springsteen. Yeah. I mean, the companies would write off losses on the tour because the record themselves made so much money, but that just doesn't happen anymore. So
it's a tough situation. Like I said, I've said this many times, I forget where I got this from, but I used to be a million seller, and now I have a million in my cellar. In fact, we just got delivered about 1,000. We have a new, it's not a new, it's an archival Brecker Brothers from 1980, and live in Germany, coming out soon. Actually, it's officially out, but we have to figure out how we're going to sell it now.
It's a video or is it a CD? Or
no, it's a 2 CD set. If you want, send me an address. I'll send you one.
Yeah, man. Dude, let's do it. I got more to
continue this. Some other.
Yeah, no. I mean, down the road. I mean, Randy. Honestly, man, I was sitting in bed last night. I could just, the hair on my arm just stood up. I could feel your brother, his presence, and he was He was smiling because he wants, not just you and your wife, but also all the brethren. To be immortalized is the wrong word, but it's my job to keep the engine running, and this is like a consequential time for my generation to find peace in isolation and try to figure out how to create something out of nothing. And for you guys, it's more about staying healthy and staying creative as well, because something will come out on the other side, and whatever it is, it has to be authentic and it has to be truthful. And I'd have a lot more faith if we had somebody at the top who recognized the soul, how desperately we need soul at this time and moving forward. So I'll leave you with that, and then we'll pick this up down the road, man. It's always great to hang with you.
Yeah, likewise, Jake. Thanks for all you do, man.
All right, man. Be cool, Rick. Be cool, man. Later. And we'll be right back with Joan Chu on the Jake Feinberg Show.
I tell her fun things and watch her start smiling. Nobody can stand on my rail.